Bienvenido! Matt Sager recapping another episode of Better Call Saul. This latest episode, Season 5, Episode 5, Dedicado a Max. Forgive any and all mutilations I do for both the English and Spanish languages. Doing my best here. This was a great episode, another in what has been a fantastic season of Better Call Saul, in which we see a lot of very simple moves for most of the characters. Not a lot of the dramatic and abrupt character changes and evolutions we've been seeing in Season 5 thus far, with one very notable exception, that of Kim. Kim dipping her feet so far into the waters of Saul/Jimmy playing dirty territory that I would go so far as to dub her Slippin' Kimmy, or consider it anyway. This episode opens exactly where the last episode ended, with Mike on this compound in Mexico, waking up wounded after a failed attempt at suicide by Thug. Bandaged, still pretty much the worse for wear, but in better shape than he'd expected to be, and frankly in better shape than he wanted. I do believe he picked his second fight with that gang of toughs with the intention of getting killed and dying on his feet. Instead, he's in a comfortable bed, being attended to by a kind and caring housekeeper, and with a doctor on the way to help see to his wounds and patch him up. This doctor, by the way, will be familiar to fans of Breaking Bad. After first rejecting the kind and gentle treatment of this housekeeper who's there to see to him and help him relax and feed him, she tells him to wait for the doctor, and he says, forget it, I'm out of here. This is Fring. What does Fring want with me? Everything with him comes with a price. He's got an agenda. I'm leaving, and frankly, he still wants to die, is my opinion. So he starts down the road, away from this beautiful farm, luxurious, peaceful, meditative even, everything that you don't associate with Gus Fring. And as he's walking down the road, his wound opens back up. He thinks about maybe calling for help or for a cab. He really can't move anymore. But this, again, is 2005. He's got like an LG flip phone. It's, of course, out of batteries. I don't know if you remember, but battery life back then was about 9 minutes. So he gives up and sits down, even as an electric car, which also back then was very low on batteries, come to think of it, begins piddling up the road. And it's Dr. No relation, Barry Goodman. This is the same doctor who treats Gus years later in Breaking Bad after he poisons himself in the process of poisoning the entire cartel. Everyone is a little bit more young and innocent here, and it's very reminiscent of that scene from Breaking Bad because once again, Mike is finding peace in the quiet life that Gus Fring can sometimes cultivate, including, in particular, there are many chickens, which is very evocative. I don't know if you remember, but in Breaking Bad, when he's recovering along with Gus, he's sitting there on the farm going, hey, if Charlie doesn't eat, nobody eats. This bread's for everybody. He's very charming and lovable when he's not being a terrifying monster. So Dr. Goodman picks him up, kind of admonishes Mike for having wandered away and for reopening his wounds and for messing up his wonderful, careful work that he's done on fixing him up, setting his recovery back. And Mike, sort of begrudgingly, but kind of accepting that there's no way around this. He's got to recover or die horribly on the streets. And, free medical care, that's very hard to come by in this or any country, including Mexico. He gets in the electric car and is driven back to Gus's compound. Saul Goodman, meanwhile, is working with Mr. Acker, this at the behest of Kim. Very, very dodgy, in absolute conflict of interest that Kim recruited him, puts her at risk of frankly being disbarred. The situation is that she's been recruited by Mesa Verde, her big client, who she works for through Schweikart and Coakley, and she's soured on them because they want to open a call center, and in so doing, they've been buying out people's land. And there's one holdout, an elderly man named Mr. Acker, who doesn't want to go, who built the house himself, who when he bought the land or leased it in 1974, he built the house himself and he planned to live there till he died. And he's pretty close to death. He is, as I said, elderly. Mesa Verde is heartless, as banks are wont to be. They want to build their call center where it will be convenient and under budget and quick. And they not only have no sympathy for Mr. Acker, but they're aggravated that he would dare to get in the way of commerce. Acker and Kim had a real connection in which he conveyed to her how scummy what she was doing really is, and she agreed. She tried really hard to get him to change his position. She tried to work with him, tried to explain to him how rough her own childhood was, and in this process, we learned a lot about her and why this is so difficult for her. She didn't have a home growing up. She was running from apartment to apartment with her broke mother. So to be evicting people, this is not something she ever signed up for. Just like Saul didn't really want to become a cartel drug lawyer, he wanted to help the little guy. So did Kim. She wants to spend her time helping her pro bono clients. Instead, she's working with Mesa Verde, and in particular working on throwing this elderly, kind man out of his house. Cranky though he may be, he's a very sympathetic character. So she recruited Saul last episode to come up to Mr. Acker and his home, and using very interesting visual aids involving a man and a horse, an act of copulation, explained that he hates Mesa Verde, and he successfully gets Acker to recruit him in a fight against Mesa Verde, trying to hold on to his land. And he's in his element here, doing all kinds of shenanigans because the sheriff's office now have been contacted by Mesa Verde. They've been told that this guy's in breach of his contract and to just simply come to his home and evict him. Saul's helping him stave off the wolf at the door. First, they do this little gimmick where they change the address. They cross out the street number on his home and on his mailbox. They arrange for lots of mail to be sent to him, care of this new address, not 2133, but 2440, something like that. He smashes little curios, old vases and stuff, and plants them underneath Acker's sand, and commissions archaeologists and museums to come and study and tell the construction workers who want to pave over this guy's house, destroy it. No, you can't come through here, sir. This may be sacred artifacts from Native American civilizations long since past. You can't destroy his property until we've completed our study, and who knows how long that's going to take. In the meanwhile, Saul's busy grinding up batteries, crushing them to dust, and along with Mr. Acker, surreptitiously seeding the sand with them, so that when people come by with a radiation detector, there's ambient radiation. It's too dangerous to bulldoze the house. They are jerking everyone's chain. Saul is being very creative in disrupting this whole process and having fun, while at the same time legitimately being a bit of a hero. This is Saul in his element. He hits peak Saul when one night he goes outside with a can of spray paint and a face mask to protect himself and paints a shroud of Jesus on the side of Acker's house and attracts a crowd of onlookers from all over the world to come and see, my God, it's a miracle. The Lord has appeared on the side of this guy's house, and this horrible bank wants to bulldoze it. How could they? In the name of the Lord, how could they? Jimmy/Saul is not afraid to get downright sacrilegious when it comes to it. The weird part of this is that despite their knowledge that Jimmy/Saul and Kim are a couple, Mesa Verde, Kevin Wachtel, and Paige, who meet with Kim every day and see her face, which is not a great poker face, they have no idea that this is all her machinations. Obvious though it ought to be. Even though before recruiting Saul, she had given them one last proposal of, look, it's not a good look throwing an old man out of his home. Why don't we try this other location? And they shot her down. And yet they still don't know or suspect that this is all her. Perhaps because it is so incredibly unethical as an attorney and so dangerous to be swimming in these waters. She's risking her entire career and future here for one man. And who would believe professional, buttoned-down, detail-oriented, perfect Kim would be willing to risk everything for a man she doesn't even know? But Saul is chipping away at them, bringing up lots of billable hours for Schweikart and Coakley, which is nice for them, but making it very difficult for them as well, really making it hard to go forward with this call center, making it almost impossible to get this guy's home from him. So Kim and Schweikart actually get the Mesa Verde team together and go, listen, maybe it's really time to think about this alternate call center. Do you really want this fight? And Kevin, who is just this stubborn hillbilly capitalist, and Paige, who is the same thing, although in slightly more modern, conservative, and urban attire and appearance and countenance. They want to fight. They want what they believe they're entitled to, a cheap, easy, and quick call center. The one that they wanted in the location they wanted. And if anything, this has created animosity between them and Mr. Acker. They now want to make him homeless as punishment for him standing in the way of their great banking call center. Kevin says, I'm not running away. I'm not moving one goddamn inch. And Kim, for her part, she's not either. Speaking of strange developments for characters, Howard, fresh from having his car destroyed by Jimmy, although I guess he didn't suspect it was him, Howard is completely unfazed. He's so deep into his Zen state of mind. In fact, he's in what looks to be a blissful meditative state as he calls Jimmy to say, just wondering if you thought about my offer. You know, anytime now, we're ready to start. Got a position lined up for you. Oh, Jimmy, I want you so bad. It is icky, creepy. We see a lot of Howard's feet because, again, he is meditating and he's got this great big wide smile, eyes beaming, feet right up in the camera like it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. And Jimmy continues to blow him off. He's amused that Howard has no idea at how uncomfortable he is at this whole situation, at how improbable to impossible it is that he'd ever consider this opportunity, and the fact that Howard has no clue that he just destroyed his car. But he's preoccupied. Kim has returned to him and said they won't back down at Mesa Verde. What's next? Jimmy tries to call Mike. Mike is both disinterested and actually unable to hear him because he's in Mexico. But he is clearly not interested in working with Saul. So while on the one hand, Saul can't hear him and asks if he's in a tunnel, Mike goes, Yeah, because metaphorically speaking, he is. He's looking to do anything but get into bed with Saul Goodman right now. Not exactly sure how he feels about Gus either, but he's not looking to take on a slimy job for Saul. But you know who is, who's always available when Mike is not? A familiar face from season 1, a guy who competed with Mike for another job, Mr. X as he refers to himself. This is the guy who tried to intimidate and embarrass Mike when the neophyte drug dealer was recruiting muscle. This is the guy who in the garage tried to goof on Mike. What do you want this little old man for? He's got a pimento sandwich. I've got a Glock 9, an Uzi, couple 45s. And this is, of course, the same guy, about twice Mike's height. Mike punches him in the throat, disarms him, kicks him around, leaves him choking on the floor, makes an ass out of him. So he is a very distant second from Mike. But just maybe, for Saul and Kim's needs, he's the man for the job. So they hire him to do as much oppo research, as they refer to it, as he's able to do on Kevin Wachtel. Saul had cautioned Kim against this, by the way. He said, this move is going to be very personal, very rough, and very dangerous. This does not dissuade Kim. And although she's horrified when Mr. X comes back and reveals the techniques he used to get into Kevin's home, she's impressed by his thoroughness. He actually did do a fairly good oppo research job, including getting the codes to his personal security, getting his entire history, every bit of dirt you could exploit him with, and it's one drunk driving charge from when he was in college 35 years ago. It's not much, but he took photos of everything. And one of these photos catches Kim's eye and brings a smile to her face. What this photo is, what it portends, what she's going to use it for, we don't know. That is for another episode, probably the one coming up next week. But she smiles at Jimmy. Jimmy smiles back a little bit nervously because he knows that they're really entering dangerous territory. And in fact, when Kim is next at her firm, Schweikart calls her and goes, listen, I want you to take a break from Mesa Verde. Go do what you want to do. Work with your pro bono clients. She goes, why? Do you suspect me of malfeasance? She's sort of projecting very heavily. And he goes, Kim, just do it, okay? Let it be. But instead, she follows him out into the hall, making a very public spectacle of, don't you dare remove me from working with my client. This is what I'm here for. This is what you hired me for. If you're accusing me of something, do it out here in the open in front of everybody. She makes the biggest scene she can make, forcing Schweikart into acquiescing and saying, okay, fine, it's your case. Drawing a huge amount of attention to her, probably because it was the only way she'd be able to maintain her case. Because if he brought her into the office, talked to her one-on-one, she would probably break. But by making a big scene, making it instead about being uncomfortable for Schweikart, she gets her way. But she is now entering Saul territory. She's got both feet in the deep end. And things are going to get pretty hot and heavy for her in the coming weeks, I suspect. This is where the fate of Kim, who we know does not exist in the Breaking Bad universe, or certainly not in any world connected to Saul's, this is where her dark fate begins, in my opinion. Whether I'll be proven right, we'll see. She's definitely taken a pretty big step from the first couple of episodes of the season where she said she didn't want to lie to her clients ever under any circumstances. She's now lying, taking part in B&E. She's in Saul territory now. Mike, meanwhile, although he's happy he didn't take the gig with Saul, he's pretty cranky, sitting around, biding his time as he recovers in Gus's farm, which again is gorgeous and serene, and where again there's a wonderful staff, mostly this one caretaker woman, treating him very kindly, feeding him, seeing to his every need, helping him repair his cell phone, but no one will answer his questions as to why he's there, what Gus wants with him. I don't think anybody there believes Gus is someone who has agendas. They don't see that side of Gus. Gus is a man containing multitudes with a different face for almost every scenario. And I suspect the people here know him just as the people at Los Pollos Hermanos know him in a very different way than we viewers know him. So Mike grouses and spends his time keeping busy. Talks with the doctor, Barry Goodman, is kind of cranky with him, but is admittedly grateful for having his life saved. He's enjoying the food he served. He befriends the hostess, fixes a leaky windowsill because he's a guy who likes to work with his hands, and he's growing very bored. Things change for him at one point when he wanders out into the town, all sort of part of this compound, and sees a bunch of happy school children running by. One of them bumps into him and knocks over his jacket, and in the process, she loses her backpack, and he is so charmed by this encounter. You know, what started this whole journey to Gus's compound for Mike was this very sad encounter with his granddaughter, Kaylee, who is everything to him, in which she brought up the sad fate of her father, Mike's son. He lost his temper and alienated her in a way that he certainly thinks is permanent. and in a way that his daughter-in-law, Kaylee's mom, is definitely put off by. He's driven a wedge through his own family. So now he sees another little girl, helps her up, sees all these kids, all this innocence, and is really charmed. You get to see this very rare glimpse of Mike just happy and at peace. And in the middle, where all the kids are running around, there's a beautiful, almost Zen fountain, just watering, bubbling over layer after layer of marble, going over several stones, and alongside the fountain, a plaque reading the title of this episode, Dedicado a Max. Max, you might recall, is Max Arciniega, one of the original Chicken brothers, the Los Pollos Hermanos, who in Season 4, Episode 8 of Breaking Bad, Hermanos, makes the appeal to the cartel, asking them to get into bed, figuratively speaking, with him and Gus. He's the one who the cartel murders in front of Gus, setting Gus down the path that we now see him on, that of working very begrudgingly with the cartel, who took from him the one that he loved. And so all this that he's building, probably the entire empire he's building, be it the meth, be it the chicken, or be it the serene farm, it's all Dedicado a Max. Mike eventually does get his face-to-face with Gus, who comes by to visit him, see how he's doing, and just check in. And Mike goes, "What am I doing here? What do you want with me?" And Gus simply explains he wanted to save his life. He wants to keep him alive. He'd like to work with him, obviously. He's made that known in the past. But that's not what this particular life-saving incident was about. Because this farm, this compound, has nothing to do with his business. He keeps his lives separate. And in a pretty poignant exchange, Mike says words to the effect of, "So, this lovely little farm town you got here, these school children, this fountain, I guess you think this makes up for all the rotten shit you do." Gus says he doesn't want to be known as the guy who funds this place. He wants it to remain anonymous. And it doesn't make up for anything. He is who he is. There's no making up for it. He's just a man containing multitudes. Sometimes he's a murderer. Sometimes he's enslaving people like Nacho or Jesse Pinkman. Sometimes he's plotting ruthless murder sprees against members of the cartel or the entire cartel. And sometimes he's a man who runs a peaceful, serene farm where school children play. We're seeing different sides to everybody in this episode of Better Call Saul, which makes it very poetic and very beautiful. Mike asks Gus who that fountain is a memorial to, but Gus doesn't answer. He simply tells the truth to Mike. He's at a crossroads. He can stay the way he is, estranged from his family, drinking, heading toward a dead end and short life, or he could join Gus, who's in a war, and he needs a soldier. Mike is understandably a bit skeptical, going, "What? So instead of working for one group of scumbags, you want me to work for you, your particular brand of scumbaggery?" And Gus says, "Yes, and I'm different. You can understand me the way I can understand you, because we both understand revenge." And that hits Mike somewhere very personal, because Mike, as we've seen, does understand revenge. And this is where that long-time, very deep and loyal partnership that we see all the way through to the end of Breaking Bad is forged. Many fates are forged in this episode of Better Call Saul, and where they'll lead us next, I can't wait to see. I'll, of course, recap that next episode when it airs. In the meantime, I'd love it if you got in touch with me. You can email matt@mattsager.com, call 646-535-4788, and please contribute to this podcast if you're so inclined. You can make any payment, one time, repeatedly, any sum, at paypal.me/mattsager. You can also check out patreon.com/mattsager. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Or if you're listening on a podcast network, please subscribe, leave ratings, stars, and you can connect with me on social media. I'm at Matt Sager on Twitter, Real Matt Sager on Instagram, and you can check out this podcast's Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Matt Sager Podcast. I am a voice actor. My voice acting page on Facebook is facebook.com/Matt Sager VO. As for everything else related to me, back episodes of this podcast, my contact info, my voiceover reels, various articles I've written, and a lot more, you can find all of that on my website, mattsagervoiceover.com.